Hello, welcome to another video. Apologies for disappearing for a while there, but we're back. We're going to be having a little bit of a change. It's going to be a weekly upload on a Saturday, but for now, let's get into the story. Recently, my wife and I went on a short vacation to Nashville. This was our first time visiting, and we never knew what to expect. After months of researching for places to stay, we pondered over Airbnbs and hotels. We decided to go with a hotel. It was reasonably priced, which was a bonus because our Canadian dollar is so shit right now. Not only was the price decent, but it was also located in a location that was dead centre of all the places we wanted to visit. For the sake of offering any bad publicity to be a hostel or anything, or any unwanted attention, we will spare the hotel's name. The front desk staff was amazing and patient with us, so I don't want them to be painted in any negative light. So we arrived late that day. We flew in since our flight had been delayed in Toronto. We checked in and went straight to our room. We just put our suitcases in the corner and went to bed. We were drop dead tired after being on the go for around 24 hours. I'm a light sleeper, and in the middle of the night I awoke. I wasn't sure what had woken me, so I figured it was a vehicle going down the street since we were near a busy street. I got out of bed to take a leak and have a glass of water. That's when I heard a noise on the hallway. It sounded like somebody was crying. I walked quietly over to the door so that whoever was out there never knew I was there. I just wanted to make sure that they was okay without invading their privacy. When I got over to the door, I pressed my eye against the little spy hole, and when I did this, the crying stopped. I was embarrassed. I figured the person heard me and just went back into their room. I went back to bed and never thought any more of it. The next morning, my wife and I were eating breakfast that we ordered from the Waffle House across the street. Man, those pecan waffles were damn good. We were planning our day and what we wanted to do first when suddenly, there it was again. Faint crying. I told my wife about hearing it that night before, and she told me I should go check to see if the person was okay. I walked over to the door and opened it, and that's when I realised the crying was coming from the room across the hall from us. I debated knocking on the door to check on the person, but chose not to. After all, it was none of my business. My wife and I got ready to head out. When we got down to the front desk, I mentioned to the front desk clerk that I was concerned for the woman staying in the room across the hall from me in 326. The clerk lost all colour in her face and at first never said anything, but within a few seconds she told me that she would send someone to check on her. As my wife and I were standing outside waiting for an Uber, I asked her if she could find the clerk's reaction to be odd. My wife did. That roll of the eye thing, and told me that I read too much into things. I told her she was right, to save us time. We didn't get back to our room until late that night. It was my wife's birthday, so we spent the evening in downtown Broadway, having a late dinner, and stopped into a few bars. When we got into our room, I had this odd feeling come over me like something was out of place. I quickly realised that our suitcase had been moved. The lock was unlocked. I found this alarming because we had the do not disturb sign on our door, and secondly, I know the door was locked. I told my wife to lock the door behind me as they headed down to the lobby. At this time, there was a different clerk at the front desk. I walked over to him and gave him the standard, how can I help you smile. I told him about what just happened. He looked genuinely upset and he said he will take a look at the cleaning schedule to see who would have been in my room. After a few moments he returned and told me he was sorry to inform me that there was no maid in my room that day. I asked him if there was any way the woman in the room across from me could have gained access to my room. I know this was an odd question to ask, but something still seems off with the situation. The man looked puzzled and he looked at me again and said, "Sir, that room has been vacant for over a few months now due to a maintenance issue." I told him that's impossible. I've heard a woman crying in there last night and this morning. His expression was much like the clerk from this morning. He looked confused and his face lost all colour. I returned back upstairs to our room and knocked on our door. At the same time, there was a knock on the door of the room across the hall, only it was coming from the inside. At this point, I was scared, so I knocked on the door to our room again, and again, a knock on 326 from the inside echoed. I began knocking frantically on our door, and knocks on 326 echoed, each one of mine. Finally, my wife opened the door. She told me that she was in the washroom and that I needed to calm down. I slammed our door shut and told my wife what had just happened. She looked concerned and told me that while I was downstairs, she had heard the woman crying again. This was enough. I walked over to the phone and called the front desk and told them to send security up. I told them there was definitely someone in the room across the hall. We waited a few minutes and I heard someone in the hallway. When I looked through the door, I saw the front desk clerk standing in the door across the hall. I watched through the hall as he knocked several times. No one opened the door. The clerk swiped a key card he had in his hand and the door unlocked. The clerk went in and returned about 5 minutes later. I opened my door, causing him to jump. I apologised for startling him. I asked him if everything was okay. He assured me no one was in the room. He told me that I was probably hearing things from upstairs. The clerk then proceeded to head back down the hall and told me to have a good night. I locked our room door and put the bar across the door. My wife and I were unsatisfied with the answer we were given, so we agreed we would stay tonight and find a new place in the morning when we then headed to bed. It was about 2:05 in the morning. I knew it was because I could see the red alarm clock right next to my bed. I had awoken again for the second time in a row, but again, I don't know what woke me. I lay there in bed trying to get back to sleep. I was drifting off to sleep when I felt a cold breeze go past the side of my head. I could see a dark figure moving at the front of my bed. I panicked and started to feel around my nightside table for this light switch. I found it, and when I flicked it on, no one was there. I stayed awake for the remainder of the night, and I began to wonder if I was going crazy. The next morning I told my wife, and she said that we would go to another hotel tonight. After calling around, we were told everywhere was booked up due to the football game that was about to go. My wife and I agreed that it was our last night in town anyway, so we should just get through it. That night, after returning from a country music show, we arrived at the lobby. The night shift clerk chatted with us for a bit, then we proceeded to the elevator. We got in the elevator, and as the doors were closing, a small hand stopped the door from closing. My mother, and what I presumed to be her daughter, stepped into the elevator with us. The mother was a small Chinese lady. She had a long, shabby hair, and her clothes appeared worn out. The little girl, however, was nicely dressed, with her hair in a bun. I asked them what floor they were on. The mother just stared at me in complete silence. The little girl looked up at me and said that we were on the 3rd floor. I smiled and said so are we. The elevator came to the 3rd floor, and the mother and daughter got out of the elevator and walked ahead of us. As my wife and I got to our room, I noticed the mother and daughter had stopped right by us. As I was unlocking our room, I looked over my shoulder and I saw the mother unlocking the room door across the hall from me. The little girl was looking towards us. She gave us one more smile and waved before disappearing into the room as her mother closed the door. That night I slept without any problems. Our alarm went off at 5 AM. It was time to get ready to head to the airport to catch our flight to Toronto. When we got to the lobby, the night shift clerk was still there. He did the typical "thank you for your stay" and "come again" speech. I told him thanks for having us, just to be friendly. We headed towards the door, then I stopped. I turned back and said to him, "I guess I was hearing things all along," and laughed. He asked me why. I told him since her mother and daughter arrived yesterday in the room, we didn't hear a thing. The man lost all colour. I asked what was wrong. That's when he told me that there still wasn't anyone in the room. He said the maintenance team still hadn't fixed the issue. I told him that's impossible. I've seen them. He asked me to describe them. When I did, his face got even whiter. He told me that over the last few years, guests have been reporting strange events similar to ours while staying on the 3rd floor. He told me that they always remember seeing a mum and a daughter in the hallway, exactly how I described them. But there was no one staying in the hotel that matched their description. That's when he told me that many people believe they are ghosts. My wife and I left the hotel vowing never to return again. We aren't sure what happened there, but we know it was unlike anything we had experienced before. We figured it was someone messing with us, but in the back of our minds, we knew what it really was.